Okay, today we will be ordering real numbers. Now, when we order real numbers, they're going to give us the numbers in different formats. They're going to give us fractions, decimals, whole numbers, square roots. So the very first thing that we need to do is to make sure that we're putting them in the same form first. Now, which form would that be? What we want to do is to go ahead and convert all numbers into decimals before ordering. Okay, so we want all of our numbers to be decimals. That is the easiest way to compare them and see their true value. Now, your questions might ask you to order from least to greatest. That means from small to big, so increasing or ascending order, or from greatest to least. That means from big to small, so you're decreasing, you're descending in value. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what it means to convert them into decimals. We have to make sure that we're solving all the square roots. Now, the calculator does that for you with the square root symbol, so no problem there. Turn all of the fractions into decimals. Again, the calculator does this for you. So that should be good. And then you need to turn all the integers into decimals by adding the period at the end and adding zeros. So for example, the number 15 will be turned into a decimal by adding the period and then adding zeros. Think about it like money. If you have $15, it will go before the decimal, okay? Now, once we have done that, we are going to compare all of the numbers vertically. That means in a list, and I'll show you a couple of examples here. If we need to add zeros, we're going to go ahead and add zeros so that all of the numbers have the same decimal value. Now, I know that you guys are usually pretty good when you're comparing positive numbers because the bigger the number, the bigger the value, right? The farthest to the right on the number line, the bigger the value, okay? But what about when you're comparing negatives and negatives? You have to order negatives. So negatives are a little bit different. It's kind of the opposite of the positives. So the farthest to the left, the least value, because that's like owing more money. So you're not worth as much, okay? So always make sure that you look back to the number line and imagine or place your numbers on the number line. The least ones will be to the left on the number line, and the greatest will be to the right of the number line. So that could definitely help you put those real numbers in order. Now let's go ahead and go over a couple of examples in our notebook. Okay, let's go ahead and order from least to greatest, okay? We're gonna go ahead and order the following numbers. Square root of 12, 1.18, pi, and square root of 23 over 2. Now, we have 4 numbers, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that they're all decimals when I compare. So since I have 4 numbers, I want you to go ahead and just write 4 decimal points, because we're going to turn all these into decimals over here. Make sure that the decimal point is lining up for you. So square root of 12. Let's go ahead and turn that into a decimal. You're going to use the square root, so you need to put second and find the square root symbol over here. So you have the square root, and it is 12. Hit enter. Now you do not need to write all of the decimals. You can just go up to the hundredths points, or the hundredths place. So go ahead and just put 3.46. We don't need to write down the whole thing. If we need to go back and add more decimal numbers, we can, but for now, let's just take the first 2. Next, we have 1.18. That does not need to be converted, so you can just go ahead and write it out. It is already a decimal. Pi. Now, we know that it is 3.14, but just in case you needed more decimal spaces, here's how you can find it. We do have the pi symbol over here in blue on the arrow button, so you would click on second, the arrow, and you see the pi symbol. Hit enter, and it tells you more digits for pi. But we're just going to go ahead and use 3.14. Now this next number. Now be very careful when you input this number on the calculator. What you put on the calculator has to look exactly how the number that they give you. So let's go ahead and do that one. It is a fraction, so the very first thing that I want to do is just get on fraction form. And in order to do that, you're going to click alpha, y equals, and we want that option number 1 for fraction. Now we have our fraction boxes. Now I only want the square root on the top. That's why you didn't do the square root first, because you only want the square root on the top, not on the bottom. So let's put the square root on the numerator. For the square root, you're going to hit second and the square root symbol. There we go. We're going to write 23. Use the arrow to go to the denominator, to the bottom of the fraction, and write your 2. Get out of that fraction. So see, it looks exactly like what they give me. Make sure that what you put on the calculator looks exactly like what they give you. And click enter, and 2.39. Okay, I do not need to add zeros because all of my numbers have the same number of decimal places. So let's go ahead, we're going to order from least to greatest. Our smallest number, go ahead and look at the whole numbers first. Our smallest is 1, so I know that that will go first, followed by 2, that'll go second. And now since I have 2 3s, now we can go ahead and look at the decimals. 14 is smaller than 46. So now I have it ordered. Now in order to write our answer, I want you to go ahead and write it in the original format of the numbers, okay? When you get a multiple choice, the numbers are going to be in the original format. So number 1, it was already 1.18. Number 2, that was this number. Square root of 23 over 2. Number 3, 3.14, that was pi. And our last one was square root of 12. So this is our final answer from least to greatest. Now let's do a second example. Let's go ahead and do from greatest to least. And let's go ahead and copy down the following numbers. Square root of 8, -4, 1 plus square root of 3, and 5 halves. So we still need to use our same strategy. We're going to turn all of these into decimals. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers, so I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals. Now let's look at our first number. It's square root of 8, so I need to turn that into a decimal. So you're going to do second square root 8, 2.82. Next, I have -4. That is an integer. So the calculator is not going to do that for you. You have to do it. Make sure that you know that the decimal goes at the end of that number, just like periods go at the end of a sentence. So that's going to be -4 over here. Next, we have 1 plus square root of 3. 1 plus square root of 3. Click enter, and it's 2.73. And next, we have 5 halves. So since that's a fraction, you're going to get on fraction mode. Remember, alpha, y equals, and put in that fraction, 5 over 2. And you can just go ahead and click enter. It'll still give you the fraction, right? So let's go ahead and change that. You're again going to go to alpha, y equals, and we're going to use that option that says FD, fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction. So go ahead and pick option 4. And there we go. We have 2.5. Now let's go ahead and look at our numbers and make sure that all of them have the same number of decimal places. I know that I need to add zeros here, and I need to add a 0 here. Remember to do that. Sometimes it works out when you do not do it, but we want you to always get the right answer, so I want you to do it properly. So always add 0 so that every single number has the same number of decimal places. Now we're going from greatest to least, so let's see what is the greatest number here. Look at the whole numbers. For greatest, I'm going to look at the positives first. So let's look at the positives. And let's look at the decimals now. The greatest one is 2.82, so that's our first one. followed by 2.73 and 2.50, and then our least value is going to be our negative. Remember that when you do your final answer, you write them down in the original format. So 2.82, that was square root of 8. 2.73, that was 1 plus square root of 3. That's a comma, sorry. Our next one is 2.5. So 2.5 was 5/2. Get rid of that so it doesn't confuse you. There we go. And our least value was -4. So -4. So now we have our list of greatest to least.